Hello, everyone, and welcome to the last round recap of Hart House Holidays Open. It's been an amazing tournament so far for me. I have 3.5 out of 4 points going to the last round. I beat my close friend and my rival in University of Toronto, Nicholas Vitas, in round four, who's a strong international master with a black pieces. So I was feeling amazing going to the last round, and I had 3.5 points facing the leader of the tournament, Razvan Preotu, who's a grandmaster at 4 out of 4. So for winning the tournament, I need to win this game, and if I win, I will clinch the first place because there's no other players at 3.5 out of 4 points. But of course, facing a grandmaster who also doesn't have to take a lot of risks, it's a huge challenge to be able to win from a position of strength. But at least I had the white pieces. And another factor in this was that I played Razvan once in Canadian Zonals this year in 2024. And I managed to win that game. It was my highest rated win so far in my chess career. And I played an amazing game in Zonals, like 99% accuracy, all the best moves. And I managed to win against him in the Zonals. But of course, he's now, as they say, a wounded grandmaster. He's gonna take me more seriously for sure, and he's gonna bring his A game here because it's also like for all the marbles for tournament victory. So that makes the game even more challenging, alongside the fact that he also doesn't have to take that much risks. For instance, in a game in zonals, there was a moment where he actually could equalize the game, but he decided to keep it more complicated, and it backfired in the end. Anyways, so I started the game with e4, and I knew that he plays three main moves in this position. He has been a Sicilian player over the years, like at least over the last, like until 2022, I only saw him play Sicilian. He's very good with Najdorf theory and like all these Sicilian sidelines. And this is the line that I actually beat him in with the Alpine Sicilian. What I saw recently, he started to play some French, like in 2023, and even in the Olympiad, he started playing some Caro-Kann. And even the first round of this tournament against Ian Finley, he played Caro-Kann. So I didn't exactly know which opening I'm going to face, so I briefly prepared against all three moves. And among all these three moves, the French was the hardest for me to find something that gives me a great winning chances against his specific repertoire. So he played the French. I was kind of unhappy when he did that, but anyways, I played the repertoire that I had prepared. I played knight d2, the trash variation. This is actually the line that I beat Grandmaster Bator Sambwev recently in the same month. So I was kind of comfortable and confident going with this. In that game, in Bator's game, c5 was also played. I played knight gf3, and in that game, Bator played knight f6, but Razvan played c takes d4, which is kind of considered the most solid and the most principled line. I took back with a knight. He played knight f6. Now after ed5, he took back with a knight. So here there's also taking with a queen, which allows knight b5. There's also a6 move, which is becoming trendy these days, stopping knight b5 and also exploiting the pin, and then trying to take with a queen. But of course, taking with a knight is the main line. And now I played knight 2 to f3. So far I'm still in prep. I played the same line against a grandmaster from Singapore. His name is Siddharth Jagadish. He was an IM back then, but now he's a grandmaster. And he gave this check on before. I played bishop d2, and in that game he castled. And this is something I had prepared for Razvan, and I actually made some improvements on my repertoire there in between the games. And I also knew that bishop takes d2 is a move, but here he surprised me with a move that I never saw in my life. He played bishop c5. So this move has been played 13 times, but actually in this position, it's only 8% of all the games that were played with bishop c5. So that's why I didn't look at this line before the game, and I didn't know exactly what to do against it. So here was the first moment in the game where I started thinking. And obviously, the first move that comes to my mind is to consolidate my knight on d4 with a move c3. So I started thinking a little bit about this, and in the main line, which is castles, I go bishop c4, goes knight c6, I trade, and then I castle. I had absolutely no concerns. I was pretty happy to get this position. It's equal, but I feel like maybe in the long term, playing against these isolated pawns, I can have some good prospects. But then I started thinking, what if knight c6 right away? The problem is if knight c6 right away, he's threatening to take on d4 and then isolate my c-pawn. Like my c-pawn is going to become an IQP in the future, which I didn't like. IQP, which is completely blocked by knight on d5. And also, if I take now and then develop my bishop, now queen b6 was something that was annoying me, attacking the pawn on b2 and the pawn on f2. And that was the main reason why I didn't go with c3. But apparently, as Razvan also told me after the game, I can sacrifice the pawn on b2, and my initiative is simply going to be too strong. So I castle. If he takes, it's actually not going to be a good move because I go c4, hit the knight, knight goes back, rook b1, sacrificing another pawn, and now bishop c3, and all of a sudden, this queen is almost getting trapped on a2, and if the queen retreats, it takes couple of moves to like get the queen into a good square. This bishop is not going to get into the game after 95. And even though white is down 2 pawns, Engine claims that it's almost like +2 in this position. And the initiative is just simply too overwhelming with 2 strong bishops pointing towards the king. So that was the reason I didn't play c3. And I feel like it's difficult, like at least at this moment in my career, it's a little bit difficult for me to have that understanding, not knowing the position, not seeing the position, to understand that I can sacrifice 2 pawns, and I'm confident and comfortable doing that against the Grandmaster. So that was the reason, after a long think, I decided not to go with c3. And I decided to play bishop b5 check. So this move has been played by Grandmaster Karthikeyan Murali against Vitaly Bernatsky, and he actually won this game with white. The downside of it is actually the fact that it trades the bad bishop that black has. Positionally, I understood that, but I thought this move is necessary because it gives me enough tempo. Like, it gives this check, it gives me 1 tempo to get the king castled, so that when queen b6 happens, I can actually defend my pawns in time. So basically, the main reason I went for this was the fact that I was too scared to sacrifice a pawn on b2 or play with an isolated pawn on d4. So he played bishop d7. I took on d7 with a bishop. Knight takes d7. Castle, castle. Normal moves. I play c4, attack the knight on d5. That's also a pretty normal move. And now he plays knight 5 to f6. And here's the first moment where I made an inaccuracy. So the bishop on d2 is kind of misplaced. I realized that. I was like, this bishop is blocking my queen. I either want this bishop on e3 or c3. The problem is if I put the bishop on e3, then knight g4 is going to come. And if I put it on c3, then knight e4 is going to be played. So in the game, I decided to play knight to c2. And the idea is to go bishop e3 and trade the strong bishop on c5. But it seemed like I kind of overestimated this bishop on c5. It's a good bishop, but I could get a better bishop on c3. So as I said, if bishop c3 right away, knight e4 is too strong. But I could start with queen to e2. Stopping knight e4, it's actually not a difficult move to find. I'm not sure why I didn't go for it. Maybe I was scared of some rook e8, e5, e4 ideas, if I recall. So let me actually check this. So maybe I was a little bit scared of rook e8. And then after bishop c3, maybe he goes with e5. But then I have knight f5, and after e4, then the other knight comes to d4, and white is actually pretty active with these pieces in the middle of the board. So I think that was maybe my main concern, that I didn't go with queen e2, but this is not scary. This is in fact more scary for black with all these sacrifices and stuff going on, and all these active pieces in the middle of the board. So I'm not sure, but the best for black is just to go queen b6. I develop the bishop to c3 now, and the rest of the game is pretty normal. Like, he brings the rooks to the middle, I do the same. Like, I even have some b4 ideas at some point. If he takes, I can go rook b1. So the best is to trade off the bishops, and you're going to get a completely equal position like this. But yeah, when I played knight c2, it gives him a slight advantage. And he plays a really good move, a5. First of all, it stops my pawn from coming to b4 and just gaining space on this side of the board. And also, after queen b6, attacking the pawn on b2, when I go b3, this pawn can become an asset to play a4 and create further weaknesses, as we can see in the rest of the game. So I played bishop e3, queen goes to b6, and here I played the move b3, which seemed a little bit automatic, but it's a slight inaccuracy again. The interesting move that I had, which I didn't consider in the game, was queen to e2. And the point is, he can't take my pawn on b2 because after rook fb1, queen c3, and rook b3, the queen on c3 gets trapped and he's going to lose it. And after queen e2, he can't take on b2, and if he starts with bishop takes e3, now I take with a knight, and now my queen guards the pawn on b2. And this time, without the pawn on b3 and with my rooks easily coming to the middle of the board, there's not much weakness for him to play against. Even though after a4, rook fd1, black is to be preferred, but it's very difficult to break white's position in this situation. So yeah, I played b3. Rook fd8 was played, normal move, x-raying my queen on d1, and I played queen e2. And here Razvan made a slight inaccuracy. He played knight e4, which is the second best move. But he had this interesting idea to take my bishop first. It looks as though after all of these trades, black doesn't have anything to show uh, uh, for all these trades because the rook is coming to d1 next. But then the point is, after knight c5, rook fd1, he has a4. Looks like I go b4 and my position is good. But after b4, then knight e3. Knight d3, attacking the pawn on b4. I have to defend it, and now knight e4 comes. And with these two knights putting pressure on the f2 pawn, my position is kind of under pressure. Like, he's not going to take it after rook f1, but my rook is going to be passive forever here, just defending a pawn on f2. But still, like, I would say, first of all, seeing the whole sequence is not easy from distance. And also, even getting here, it's not so easy to see how black can break through. Like, you have to be considerate of me going knight f1, then rook f1, and then knight e1, and then trading these pieces very slowly and then making a draw. So he played knight e4, which I think is a very reasonable move. But now I found the best move, bishop b4. So I can't play rook d1 because knight c3 wins the exchange. So my idea was to go bishop d4 and prepare the move rook fd1. This time the bishop on d4, there's no knight c3. And if he takes my bishop, then I can always take with a rook. So he played knight df6, which is the best move. And here I played rook fd1, and I offered him a draw in this position. So, as I said, going into this round, I needed to win the tournament. But at the same time, draw would have guaranteed me the second place. And going into the game, my idea was to actually try and press for the win. But getting this position out of the opening with the white pieces just slightly worse, with black having all the cards in here. Like, let's say the position is not that bad, but the problem is black is simply more active and much more comfortable. And I knew that if he wants to make a draw, it's not going to be a problem with him. It's not going to be like he's going to struggle super hard to hold this if he's actually playing for a draw just to win the tournament. So I was like, I know I can't win this game, so I will offer him a draw. If he accepts, then at least I clinch the second place. And if he doesn't, then he might start like thinking in a way that he needs to overpress, he needs to take some risks, and then maybe I actually get some chances to play for the win. Given the rating difference, he decided to continue the game. And his position is, of course, also better. And this was actually very instructive, which I come back to at the end of the recap. He took on d4. I took with a rook. Rook takes d4. And here I had a big decision. I was thinking whether to take with a c knight or the f knight. Both of them have their pros and cons. So if knight c takes d4, I was a little bit worried of the move a4. The point is, when I take with the f knight, if he goes a4, I can always go b4 and then run my majority. But with this, now after a4, the a file is getting open. After a move like rook e1, rook d8, queen e3, still slightly better for black, some pressure on b3, but nothing crazy. Even knight fd4 is also pretty much fine. I spent a long time, but both moves are actually pretty close. Played rook d8, queen e3, queen d6, and one important thing I need to mention is that in these sorts of structures with 3-3 versus 4-2, which are very common in Tarrasch and even like lines like Alapin. The most important thing for both sides is to control the d file. And the reason he has the advantage in this position is that he has full control over the d file, the only open file in the position. So I played f3, attacking the knight. And here he made a slight inaccuracy, which I think it's a practical move actually. Like it's like 0.2 difference with the top move, which is knight c5, which keeps the tension and pressure in the position. But he played e5, which forces me to find the tough sequence of moves. So first of all, I was starting to think, what if I take, and after ed4, I go e5. So now, if he takes my queen, I take his queen, and looks like I'm equalizing because this pawn is going to be weak. It's going to be like rook d6, knight e3, sorry, takes, rook d6, and then knight e3, and I'm going to be fully equal. But then I realized that he has queen c5 or queen b6. Queen b6 is even better. And now if I try to block this d pawn, then the knight is going to move to g4, and all of a sudden my pawn on e5 is going to hang, and the knight is probably also going to jump to e3 at some point. So I didn't like this, and correctly so. This is close to winning for black. And I found the best move, which was knight to b5, attacking the queen on d6, and at the same time the knight on e4. And I saw that his only move is to go queen d2, trading the queens. And now I found the best move, knight to e3. So now I save my knight on c2, and I'm attacking the knight on e4. So now if he moves the knight back, I will go rook d1, and because of the back rank issues, I'm going to trade the rooks, and after trading the rooks, there's no advantage left for black in this position. The only advantage that my opponent has is this strong rook on the second rank. And he found the best and most pressing move, which is rook to e2. So now if I take, he's going to take my knight, and the other pawn is going to hang. So I found the best move again, rook to d1, exploiting the back rank, and he found the best move, which is h5. And in this position, I think I made a very slight inaccuracy. Like, Engine doesn't even say that there's a big difference in the eval. Like, there's literally no difference in the eval. But I personally think that this move was the start of a chaos in the game. So I played the move knight to d5. So I was thinking where to put this knight, where to d5, f5, f1. And I believe right now that knight f1 would have been a pretty much easy hold. Not super easy, but again, like with knight f1, now this knight is hit. And after knight c5, the point is the knight on f1 guards the square on d2, and I can go rook d2 and get rid of this strong rook on the second rank. Now after rook e1, king f2, rook a1, knight c3, I simply defend all of my weaknesses, and there's really not a clear way for my opponent to make progress here. Of course, he probably would have continued, but I just don't see it. Even e4, I will probably let him take and just restrict these knights. At the same time, maybe I bring my own knight to some good squares. But yeah, I played knight d5. Looks like more active, but in the game, I was kind of hoping that he takes, because now after takes cd5, if he tries to like blockade the d pawn, he's not going to be in time. All of a sudden, white is the one in the driving seat. I go d6, and then I bring this rook to c1, start attacking the knight. He's going to go knight f8. I take the pawn on b7, and all of a sudden, this d pawn is going to become a huge strength. This is still holdable for black, but definitely, if you had gone for this, I would have been the one pressing for the win. So I was kind of hoping that this happens. And for some reason, I underestimated this simple move knight to c5. And when I got to this position, I kind of didn't know what to do and how to proceed. The idea to actually have another easy hold is to find a very accurate sequence of moves in this position. So I start with knight d to c3. That's the correct move. And the point is, after rook c2, I want to bring this rook to e2 and get rid of the rook on the second rank again. But the problem is, if I go here, then knight e3. And if I go rook e2, then rook c1 is checkmate. So first, I give some luft to my king. And whatever he does, even e4, like some more aggressive move, I'm going to go rook e1. And after these trades, rook e2 is going to come. And all of a sudden, once I get rid of this rook on the second rank, the drawing procedure is going to be much, much easier. And I don't think black has any meaningful advantage in this position. So yeah, after knight c5, I made a slight inaccuracy. I took on f6. looks like such a natural move, ruining black's pawn structure, and also creating space for my rook to become active on d5. So here I was thinking, maybe I have some winning chances. Maybe all of a sudden he's in trouble because now material is equal. If he goes b6, I'm going to go rook d6 and start harassing these pawns. And if the knight drops back, which happened in the game, I realize that I have knight c3, rook c2, and now knight e4. And now I'm threatening rook d2. So the only way he can keep the game going is the move f5. So computer doesn't like this as the best move. Computer thinks king g7 is better, but I think practically speaking, after king g7, rook d2, white is pretty much okay, and I don't think black has that much to play for. First, the game will go on, but it's a much easier hold. But after f5, now it's getting a little bit tricky for me. I need to find more accurate moves here. So in this position, I actually kind of automatically played this move knight to f6. So it looks pretty much natural, giving a check to the king, and also attacking this pawn on h5, and at the same time the pawn on e5 is also hanging. So I kind of didn't spend that much time on this move, like I spent only 1 minute, because it seemed so natural, but the better move that could have held the game was the move knight g3. So the idea with knight g3 is that my knight can come to f1 again. So you might ask why. The point is, after knight f4, which is the best move, attacking the rook and the pawn on g2, I can actually take on e5. And the point is, rook c1 check shouldn't be met by king f2, which loses the rook, but it can be met by knight f1. And now I'm totally fine. And it's actually black who's in trouble with all these weaknesses on the king side and queen side. So the best he has is to actually repeat the position with rook c2 and just make the draw. The line actually goes like rook c2, g3, check, and some sort of perpetual like this. But he could have put more pressure with a move like h4. And the line goes like check, I take the pawn on f5, and then he starts taking some pawns. My rook drops back, and then rook e2. Again, like this rook on the second rank was a very crucial pattern that you can see in all of these lines that lead to me drawing the game. So now, if the rooks get traded or my king gets active on the second rank, then I have some really good chances to hold this position. In fact, this is pretty much equal. But yeah, I was a little bit greedy. I played knight f6 check, and after king g7, again, another automatic looking move, taking the pawn with check, which is an inaccuracy. In fact, it was much better for me to give the check on e8. And the point is, once this king comes to f8 and attacks my knight here, I have knight to d6. And all of a sudden, there are more important pawns than this h pawn that are hanging, the f pawn and the e pawn. And after knight f4, the point is, here I can't take because of check and knight d3, but I can take the other pawn on the other side. So he has to now defend the e5 pawn, otherwise all these pawns are going to fall. But now I play h4, saving my pawns on the king's side, and with knight f5 coming next, defending this pawn, it's very difficult for him to make further progress in this position. But of course, I would say this is now a 3-result game. Anything can happen with this position, even though the computer claims that it's pretty much equal. So yeah, I took on h5 and he played king g6. And here I started realizing I'm in some sort of trouble. Like here I was like, wait a minute, it's not looking that great. So here I was spending a long time thinking whether to go knight g3 and allow knight f4, or to sacrifice the knight on h5 and win 3 pawns. And it was better to actually sacrifice the knight and win 3 pawns with rook takes e5. So I saw that, and I was thinking about this position after this. So here I have 4 pawns for the knight. So it looks like I'm doing great, but the problem is my king is cut off in the back rank. And after knight f4, I have to go g3, and the king gets permanently cut off here. And the top line actually continues in a very normal way. He gives this check. I can't go to h1 because then knight g5, knight f3 stuff are going to come with my king in the mating net. So I have to go to f1, and after rook h2, I go for this b pawn on b7. And the play will continue like here, check, he takes on f3, I take on b7, he takes on g3. And this looks very scary with this f pawn coming down the board and a knight supporting it. This looks losing. But in fact, computer claims that this is still holdable But when you see the moves that computer gives, like let's say it gives you have to go rook b8 and after king g7, rook b5, and that's the only move that keeps it under -1. It it I would say that this is practically lost. Like it's objectively drawn, but practically speaking, it's insanely difficult to hold this endgame. And this is what Razvan also agreed to when we were talking about the game afterwards. Like he was pretty confident that he's gonna somehow win this. So I decided to go knight g3. And now he plays a very nice move. If he goes knight f4, I'm going to win the pawn on e5. And after he wins the pawns on h2 and g2, I'll win more pawns on f5 and a5 as well. And we're getting close to a position where everything is starting to get liquidated and we're getting close to a draw. But f6, keeping this strong clump of pawns, was a very important move by him. I took on a5, he plays knight f4. In this position, I'm up 2 pawns, but the problem is my king is so weak and it's so difficult to defend against g2. And here I made an inaccuracy, which I feel like this was the moment where my position became losing from a difficult but holdable position. So I played a4. My idea was that I wanted to go for this pawn on b7 with rook b5 or rook a7. But the point is, if I go for it like this, then I will lose this a pawn as well. So I had this prospect to save this pawn and then win this pawn on b7, so I get 3 connected passed pawns on the outside. But as you can see from the rest of the game, these pawns are not going to be super dangerous. So I played a4, trying to like keep these 3 connected passers. But the best I had was to go king f1. And here, it's actually tricky for him. If he takes with a rook, it's actually a mistake. Because now I play rook a8, trying to give some checks to the king from behind. So if he takes the other pawn on h2, now material is equal. But now I give this check, he comes back. Now I keep harassing the pawns, and once he goes to g7, now I go rook b8. All of a sudden, I'm threatening to win 2 pawns with check. If he goes king g6, I don't even take. I start giving checks again on g8. And this is probably going to be a draw again. But he could have got a much better position with knight takes g2, but after knight e2, it's definitely not clear how to make progress for black. He's going to give a check. I go king e1. He protects this strong knight on e3 with f4. But even though it looks really nice for black, and it is actually nice, the thing is after rook b5 takes rook b7, it is not so clear how he's going to win this game. I'm still up a pawn, and there's no instant way to win material. Like the best the computer gives is giving this check and going knight h4, attacking this pawn on f3. So king f2 is not possible because of some e4 takes f3 ideas. And if I go knight g1, then knight f5. And the main advantage is this strong rook on the second rank all the time and his more active king. Of course, I'm still going to get pressed, but after knight e2, I can really hope to hold this position. But anyways, I then go king f1. I played a4, which I think is the losing mistake. Now, it takes on g2. I go king f1, takes on h2. And here's the last one where I could have maybe put more resilience. I could have gone rook a8. And the idea is the same. I start giving these checks from behind to the king on g6. And if he goes knight d3, which is the move he played against my move in the game, which is rook a7, now I have check, king f7, and now rook d8, attacking the knight on d3 and also the pawn on f5. So he would have given this check and taken the pawn on f3, but now I could have taken this pawn on f5. Rook f5, rook d3 would have been a draw, but still like some life in the position after knight c5. Apparently black is still winning, but it's going to be much more work compared to what we had in the game. There's this other move that he can play as well, which is rook b2, just going for this b3 pawn. This is what scared me in the game. I really wanted to attack this pawn on b7, so in case of rook b2, I can take and then defend my own pawn as well. But apparently I can give up this pawn on b3 and then just activate my king like this. This is still losing, like it's minus 1.4, probably losing even with correct play, but again, more work to be done for him to convert this. But in the game I played rook a7. I really wanted these 3 connected pass pawns, and I really overestimated it for some reason. So he plays here, I take, rook f2 check, king g1, and rook takes f3. And in this position, So from distance, I was like, okay, this is a race. This is a race. I might be able to like get these pawns rolling, and in a good world, maybe I can win the game. But when I got to this position, like even from distance, I felt like this is a race that I'm definitely the underdog in. But I felt like maybe it's challenging for him. Maybe I can actually pose some threats, maybe create some problems. But when I got to this position, I was like, first of all, in the worst case, he can go knight c5 and win one of these pawns. And also, these pawns are much stronger because they will win some tempos on my king, as we can see in the rest of the game. So I retreat the knight, rook e3, again another tempo on the knight. I reroute my knight to c3. Looks like my knight is heading to d5, which is a very nice square. But after f4, knight d5, rook e1 check, I just realized that these pawns are just going to come with tempo, and I just simply don't have enough time to even get this pawn to a7. So I played king g2, he goes e4, and all of a sudden f3, f2, f1 is coming, all with tempo. And here was the moment where I realized that the game is definitely gone, and there's no more chance to even create some problems. Of course, I tried playing on a little bit, but the rest was pretty simple for him, and I don't think he faced any challenges for the rest of the game. I gave this check, I gave another check on b5, but the king just gets more active. Knight comes to f5, trying to maybe get some perpetual here, but of course he's going to see it. f3 check, king goes to h2, rook e2 check, best move. Now, either king g1 or king h1. I played king g1, but then after king h3, rook e1 mate is threatened, and if knight g3, he can always take it and checkmate me in the next move. So in this position, after king h3, even though the material is equal, these pawns are too strong. My king is in a mating net, and the mate is coming. So I resigned the game in this position, and Razvan won the tournament with 5 out of 5. And this was my first defeat in the games that I started making recaps for. So I went 4 out of 5 in Ottawa, 3 wins, 2 draws. Here we had 3 wins, 1 draw. And now I finally lost the game, and you guys got to see me making a recap, losing a game. But I did it against a good opponent, against a strong grandmaster, member of Canadian national team. He actually had a great performance in the Olympiad. He's in sensational form these days. So in general, even though it was a tough loss, I would have been much more happy if I could have held this position with a move like, let's say around here. Maybe if I could have held it with some rook f1 and knight f1 and rook d2, I would have been much more happy. But anyways, the tournament ends with 3.5 out of 5. I finish in this 4th place. There are 2 other people who leapfrogged me after this loss, even though going into this round I was in the 2nd place. But yeah, Razvan, deservingly so, wins the tournament. So let me insert this result here as well. With 5 out of 5. And I think, if you guys remember the recap I made against Bator when I beat him, I said it was very instructive for me to see a grandmaster like him losing to a low-rated player like me, being so enthusiastic about analyzing the game and learning new ideas about the game. So this is one thing I learned from Bator, and even from Razvan. When I beat him in the zonals, he generously actually suggested to analyze the game with me and like discover some new ideas. This is something I realized against grandmasters, that they love learning. And the other thing I learned was his desire to win games. Like, I had tournaments where I was 4 out of 4, 6 out of 6 going into the last round, and I was always happy with a draw, even in a slightly better position, just to clinch the win of the tournament. But he decided to actually go for it and play for the win and finish with 5 out of 5, or the full point. So this desire and enthusiasm to win games and play for the win in all situations was also very instructive for me. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this recap as well. This game was pretty rich, I think. It had a lot of interesting ideas for both sides. I'll probably be back with another tournament in mid-January. I might play in Ottawa again in an open tournament. So I will try to keep making recaps for these tournaments as well, and hope you guys enjoyed this recap as well. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to be notified about the future content. I will try to upload some content aside from recaps in this channel as well in the next couple of weeks. And make sure to let me know your opinions about this game in the comments down below. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. Really appreciate it, and have a great one. Goodbye.